Okay, lads, it's time to focus on a massive Champions League game coming up. Borussia Dortmund against Newcastle. Nick, doesn't get much bigger than this. I mean, this is a massive game in the group stage. That Dortmund win at Newcastle really blew that group wide open. What are you looking forward to and expecting in this game for your beloved Newcastle? Because this really seems like crunch time now with these back-to-back games against Dortmund.
Yeah, it's been a strange situation for Newcastle. Sven Botman went out, and Jamal Lascelles came in and has kind of bridged things for them. But where you're at is all the injuries that Newcastle has been facing right now. The depth for sustaining a battle on two fronts has made Eddie Howe make choices, and I think Dortmund is they're just a little bit better prepared for games like this because of that. What I didn't appreciate as much, I knew rotation would be tough because you've got familiarity issues. You forget about the toll it takes on a player to be not chosen for a game, not because he's not good enough, but because he's being saved for another game. And there's just been an adjustment period. I think this will be the game that ultimately determines whether Newcastle go here or are fighting for that third spot. And it's a scary place to play. I've been fortunate to be to a game at Dortmund. Holy cow, what a blast. But it's not a fun place to go.
Yeah, this is, I guess, Andy, when we think about Newcastle being in the Champions League, this is the kind of game away at Dortmund where we're like, okay, you worked really hard all our season to get there. Now, what are you going to do in the thick of it? And like Nick mentioned, this is pretty much the group for both Dortmund and for Newcastle in terms of, Newcastle still got to go to PSG and then obviously host Milan in their final two group games after this one. So I guess for you, what is a good result here for Newcastle? Is it just kind of sitting in and being a bit more defensive, or can they actually do that? Or would they have better success going and playing how they usually like to?
Yeah, these back-to-back games with Dortmund were always probably going to decide what the group was going to be, because it felt like PSG, even with the changeover that they had in the summer from coaching staff to the playing squad, it felt like they were going to be kind of there at the top, and then it was going to be these two battling for second and third, and who goes into the Europa League, which, as Nick has pointed out, is a pretty good pathway to the Champions League again next season for Newcastle. But yeah, it's to drop the 3 points at home in the way that they did, I think was especially, I don't know, for me, was a bit worrying. I think for Newcastle that they have maybe come to this level a little too early, maybe a season too early, and they've not had the opportunity to build the depth in the squad. I think if you take their 11 and you compare it against any of the other teams in this group and a lot of teams in the Champions League, they can compete with anyone. They might not beat everyone, but they can compete with absolutely anyone. But it's the depth that's not quite there. I'd say they're 13 or 14, very strong. You get in the Champions League group stage and you get in a group like this, you need to be 18 to 20 deep because you're still competing in the Premier League every single weekend. And results haven't really suffered too much there. It's been the Champions League where they've had a little bit of struggle. So if they can go in, get a point, keep themselves there, even with Dortmund for second going into the final two games, I think having Milan at home on the final day, I don't want to say chalk down 3 points, but that is certainly preferable to having to play, I don't know, PSG on the final day.
Yeah, it really is. It's such an intriguing group, and we hoped it would be like this when we saw the draw come out. Maybe, Nick, you were hoping that Newcastle would stroll through, but for neutrals out there everywhere, this was the group everyone had their eyes on, and it really looks like it's going to go down to the wire. Nick, when we focus on Dortmund, the attacking players there are really interesting, right? When you look at all the different types of talents they have, and then obviously Gio Reyna from a USMNT perspective, someone we focus on a lot. Him coming back into full fitness and playing more and getting more minutes and playing really well. How are they going to line up in this game? Because there are so many different ways Dortmund can take this.
It's true. One of the things that makes Dortmund tricky to predict is it's for so long we've thought of them, even when Sancho was there, as a Lewandowski or a Haaland. They've done a great job of finding that Aubameyang, right? Of finding that key piece. That guy is, that guy's there. Maitland's very good. They have some very good players. But this is all about rotation. And what's interesting for Newcastle is they're very fortunate. They're playing Arsenal. Usually you think at the weekend, oh man, there's going to be some focus. Dortmund has a pretty big game. They're playing Bayern Munich in what has virtually been a title decider, these two games every single year. So I think what's interesting is Newcastle rested so many of their players at midweek in the League Cup. and went into the Premier League weekend probably better geared for this and probably less likely to take their eye off the ball than Dortmund, because the Klassiker is everything. I mean, it is an entire country watching a match thinking this could be it. So I actually think Dortmund won't have the chance to put their best unit out there because both of these games are so important.
Yeah, it really is. And obviously Dortmund are unbeaten in the Bundesliga so far this season and doing pretty well after a bit of a slow start. So all of that, given that, again, they lost Jude Bellingham in the summer, and we see how well he's doing at Real Madrid. So again, just so many incredible talents, and they're a very dangerous team for this Newcastle side. Andy, when we look at Newcastle, you said maybe a little bit, maybe jaded, I guess would be a good word to sum them up in some of these Champions League games when they try and focus on rotating the lineup and still getting used to that. Just seemed that was the kind of the problem against Dortmund last time out, almost being a little bit predictable and then hit at a key time with a goal. And this is a new experience for them, so we kind of expect that.
Yeah, you do. You expect to have growing pains, but we've also seen, especially Premier League clubs, for the first time into the Champions League, come in and ride the wave of momentum or just the confidence that you take from qualifying for the Champions League and go on and have nice little run. And that's, again, not to take away from what Newcastle have done, because halfway through the group, they're exactly where they need to be in the battle to get into the knockout stages. It's exactly where you would have expected them to be in this group. I think you just want to see a little bit more of the performance, and that's been the thing. We saw that midweek last week against Manchester United in the League Cup. They go out there and with, as Nick said, they rotate heavily. They get Tino Livramento back into the team and continue his kind of reintegration into the squad. Lewis Hall coming along at left back. You don't have to play any of the three starting center backs that you typically would, and just able to get that very comfortable win, by the way, at Old Trafford, we should say, and set yourself up nicely for a massive week. Nick said it. Arsenal, Dortmund, back-to-back. This is what being in the Champions League is all about. So I would expect it's going to be probably first-team squad for Newcastle the rest of the way, probably until they hit the winter break, because this is, obviously it's not the end of the season, but it's kind of crunch time for what direction I think their season is going to go in.
Score prediction, I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. I think that Newcastle, this will suit them quite well on the counter. Dortmund have to come out and take a few more risks at home in the Champions League. Nick, what are you going for, mate?
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I just don't know with Isak's fitness battles and Boatman's fitness battles and Tonali's suspension, you're going to end up asking 31-year-old Callum Wilson to probably go 80 minutes against Arsenal and then 80 minutes a couple days later. The center forward depth isn't there. So it's hard for me to see more than a goal coming from Newcastle. I just think their defensive setup has been very good. So I'm probably a little biased. I probably should say 1-0 Dortmund, but I think the Magpies will find a goal.
Andy, what are you going for, mate? Trio draws?
Yeah, I'll go 2-1 to Dortmund. I just think, Nick laid out all the reasons right there, and the home field advantage and just the experience, I think, of having been in this competition before you get into the second half of the group stage, it starts to mean a lot more.
It does. And we'll keep you covered on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com, all the latest news from that Dortmund-Newcastle clash, analysis, highlights, and reaction from a huge game in Germany as Dortmund and Newcastle square off in a key Champions League game.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock. And be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you there.